The first thing I learned that Christmas was this: silence can look like weakness to people who have never seen it become evidence. I stood under a 12-foot tree in the grand ballroom of the Harrington Grand, surrounded by gold ribbon, white lights, and the soft kind of holiday music that makes even expensive lies feel warm. Snow tapped lightly against the tall windows behind me, soft as fingertips on glass. The room smelled like pine, cinnamon, and money. Not old money. Not honest money. The kind of money people borrow from someone else and then smile like they earned it. My wife, Rachel, stood beside me in a red dress that looked perfect from every angle. Her hand rested on my arm, not with affection, but with instruction. In front of us, on a polished mahogany podium, sat a large cream-colored card with gold lettering across the top, with love and gratitude from the Collins family. Her family, her name before mine, her story before the truth. Rachel leaned close enough that her perfume brushed my collar and whispered, "Just sign under my parents' names. It'll look better." She said it gently, almost sweetly, the way people speak when they are asking you to disappear while pretending they are including you. Across the ballroom, her mother, Margaret Collins, watched with her chin lifted and a champagne flute in her hand. Her brother Brandon stood near the bar, grinning like he already had a joke ready. Tyler Grant, Rachel's old college friend, stood a few feet behind them, wearing a navy suit and the kind of smile men use when they think the room already belongs to them. Everyone was waiting. Not for me to speak. Not for me to be honored. Just for me to sign. That was always my role in the Collins family. Quiet. Useful. Present when the bill came. Invisible when the applause started. I looked down at the pen Rachel had placed in my hand. It was gold, heavy, probably rented with the rest of the evening. I could feel the eyes on me. 100 guests, maybe more, all wrapped in velvet jackets, pearl earrings, holiday laughter, and the polite cruelty of people who believe a man with a calm face must not have a breaking point. Rachel smiled wider for the photographer. "Daniel," she whispered, sharper this time. "Don't make this awkward." I did not answer. I signed my name beneath hers, slow and clean, Daniel Whitaker. The ink dried almost instantly. The room clapped. Margaret raised her glass. Brandon laughed under his breath. Rachel exhaled like she had survived something difficult. But she had no idea what I had just signed. She thought it was a favor. She thought it was another small surrender. She thought I was helping her family preserve the beautiful little fiction that the Collinses had paid for this entire Christmas gala. I folded my hands in front of me and looked toward the screen above the stage, where the words Collins Family Christmas Legacy Dinner glowed in elegant script. In my jacket pocket, my phone vibrated once. I did not need to look, but I did. One message from my assistant appeared on the screen, projection file replaced. "Ready when you are." I slipped the phone back into my pocket and looked at Rachel. She was still smiling, still glowing, still convinced I was the same quiet husband she could move around a room like a chair. That was her mistake. Because the quiet man she brought to the stage was not there to save her reputation. He was there to bury the lie under its own receipts. And before the night was over, everyone in that room would know exactly who paid for Christmas. Before Rachel learned to make me feel small in public, she practiced it quietly at home. That is how most people change. Not all at once. Not with a slammed door or one cruel sentence you can frame and point to later. It happens in inches. A look held too long. A joke not corrected. A seat saved for everyone except you. My name is Daniel Whitaker, and for most of my adult life, I believed being steady was the same as being loved. I was 43 years old, born in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, raised by a father who drove a delivery truck and a mother who clipped coupons even when we had enough. We were not poor in the way people write songs about. We were practical. We measured life in grocery lists, winter tires, mortgage rates, and whether the furnace would make it through February. So when I built Whitaker, freight solutions from 2 used box trucks and a rented office behind a tire shop, I did not post about it. I did not buy a sports car. I did not start wearing watches that needed their own insurance policy. I bought better equipment. I paid drivers on time. I learned routes, fuel costs, warehouse schedules, and the quiet art of keeping promises. By the time Rachel and I had been married 14 years, my company had contracts in 6 states, 48 employees, and a warehouse outside Harrisburg big enough to echo when you walked through it at night. But Rachel never said it that way. To her friends, I was just in logistics. 2 words. Soft. Flat. like something you stepped over on the way to a more interesting conversation. At first, I told myself she was being modest. Then I noticed how her voice changed when she talked about other men. Tyler Grant was in private equity. Brandon was building connections. Her father had a legacy. I had trucks. I had invoices. I had a work phone that rang during dinner and hands that still smelled faintly like cardboard, diesel, and hand soap no matter how many times I washed them. Rachel used to love that about me. At least, I thought she did. Early in our marriage, she would sit on the floor of our first apartment in sweatpants, eating takeout from paper cartons, listening while I talked about delivery routes like they were treasure maps. She would put her bare feet against my leg and say, "You see the whole board, Daniel. That is why I trust you." I held on to that sentence for years, maybe too long, because somewhere between her first charity committee, her mother's country club lunches, and the house we bought in a neighborhood where people judged your worth by the quietness of your garage door, Rachel stopped saying she trusted me. She started saying I did not understand appearances. The first time her mother called me useful, I laughed because I thought it was a bad compliment from an older woman who had never learned warmth. The second time, I looked at Rachel. She heard it. She looked down at her salad. That was the moment I should have understood. A wife does not have to repeat the insult to join it. Sometimes silence signs her name for her. By the time Margaret Collins announced the Christmas legacy dinner, I already knew the room would not be about family. It would be about performance. Margaret did not invite people to celebrate. She summoned them to witness. The email arrived in early November with a subject line written like a press release, "An evening of gratitude and legacy." Rachel forwarded it to me at 6:42 in the morning while I was standing in the warehouse, watching frost cling to the loading dock doors. Under her mother's message, Rachel added one sentence. "We should help make this special." We. That word used to mean two people carrying the same box. In Rachel's mouth, it had started to mean my hands and her credit. At first, the requests were small enough to ignore. A deposit for the ballroom at the Harrington Grand because her parents were waiting on a transfer. A floral invoice because Margaret's card had a fraud hold. A jazz trio because Brandon knew someone and it would be embarrassing to cancel. Then came the lighting package, the valet service, the videographer, the custom ornaments with the Collins name stamped in gold, and a donation to the hotel's holiday charity fund, so the family could be mentioned from the stage. Each request came wrapped in urgency and guilt. Rachel would stand in the kitchen with her phone in one hand and coffee cooling beside her, saying, "Daniel, it is just easier if you cover it now. Mom will pay us back." She always said us. The money always came from me. I did what I had learned to do over 14 years of marriage. I stayed calm. I asked for invoices. I requested email confirmations. I paid from a business account only when the charge could be documented, categorized, and legally traced. Rachel thought that meant I was cooperating. She did not understand that a man who runs freight for a living knows the value of a paper trail. Every shipment has a number. Every pallet has a destination. Every missing item leaves a mark somewhere. Money is no different. By Thanksgiving, the file on my office computer was already labeled Harrington. Inside were receipts, screenshots, bank confirmations, and messages. From Rachel with phrases like, "Please do this quietly," and "Do not mention your company name." That last one sat in my mind like a cold coin. Do not mention your company name. The company that paid our mortgage. The company that bought her car. The company that quietly rescued her brother from 2 failed ventures and her parents from a tax bill they called a misunderstanding. One Saturday afternoon, I drove to the Harrington Grand myself. I did not tell Rachel. I parked near the side entrance where delivery vans unloaded crates of linen and cases of sparkling cider. The hotel lobby looked like a Christmas card for people who had forgotten what winter felt like. Marble floors, brass railings, a fireplace large enough to heat a small church. The event manager, a woman named Claire, shook my hand and thanked me for my generosity. Not Rachel, not Margaret, me. She said, "Mr. Whitaker, the Collins family is lucky to have a sponsor like you." Sponsor. The word landed clean and hard. I smiled politely, asked for the final itemized statement, and gave her my assistant's email for projection materials. On the drive back, the sky turned gray over Route 283, and I remember thinking how strange it was that betrayal rarely announces itself. Sometimes it arrives as an invoice. Sometimes it comes with a logo, a seating chart, and your wife's careful instruction to stay invisible. The night of the dinner, The Harrington Grand looked like it had been built for people who wanted Christmas to come with a guest list. Snow lined the curb in soft white ridges, and the valet stand glowed beneath a wreath the size of a truck tire. Inside, the ballroom shimmered with candlelight, crystal, and red velvet bows tied around every chair. A 12-foot tree stood near the stage, covered in gold ornaments that reflected 100 faces at once. Everyone looked polished. Everyone looked pleased. And almost everyone looked past me. Rachel moved through that room like she owned the air. She kissed cheeks, touched elbows, laughed at jokes before they finished, and introduced me only when she had to. "This is Daniel," she would say, then turn back to whoever mattered more. "Not my husband. Not the man who built a company from 2 used box trucks. Just Daniel," placed gently at the edge of the sentence and left there. I watched her mother, Margaret, accept compliments as if she had personally hung every light in the room. "We wanted to give everyone something beautiful this year," she told one couple near the dessert table. There it was again. That little word wearing someone else's wallet. Brandon found me near the bar while I was holding a glass of club soda with lime. He wore a plaid dinner jacket and the relaxed smile of a man who had never paid for the room he was laughing in. He slapped my shoulder a little too hard, then leaned close enough for 3 cousins and a banker from Lancaster to hear. "There he is," Brandon said. "The quiet signature guy." The group chuckled. Not loud. Not cruel enough for anyone to call it cruel. Just enough to test the floor. I looked at him and smiled politely. He liked that. Men like Brandon always do. They mistake restraint for permission. "I am serious," he continued, lifting his glass. "Every family needs one guy who can sign where he is told and not ask too many questions." More laughter. A woman in pearls covered her mouth with 2 fingers. Rachel stood 6 feet away beside Tyler Grant, close enough to hear every word. I know she heard it, because her eyes flicked toward me for half a second. Then she smiled at Tyler like nothing had happened. That was the cut. Not Brandon. Not the cousins. Not the strangers enjoying a cheap joke in an expensive ballroom. Her. A husband can survive being underestimated by fools. It is harder when his wife hands them the measuring tape. I set my glass down on the bar. Softly. No scene. No raised voice. The ice shifted once, then went still. Across the room, Margaret stepped onto the small stage and thanked everyone for coming to celebrate the Collins family's tradition of generosity. The word generosity floated through the ballroom like perfume sprayed over smoke. People clapped. Brandon raised both hands as if he had just funded a hospital wing. Rachel touched Tyler's arm and laughed at something he whispered. I looked at the screen behind Margaret, where the Collins name glowed, above a gold snowflake, and felt something inside me settle into place. Not anger. Anger is hot, messy, easy to waste. This was colder than that. Cleaner. The kind of quiet that comes after a decision has already been made. I had spent years telling myself Rachel would remember who I was if I stayed patient long enough. But patience can become a room you lock yourself inside. That night, watching my wife smile while her family turned me into the punchline of a party I paid for, I finally heard the lock click open. That was when Tyler Grant finally stepped into the center of the evening, as if the room had been waiting for him to take his mark. I had known his name for years, always wrapped in Rachel's careful little stories. Tyler from college. Tyler who moved to Boston. Tyler who knew investors. Tyler who could open doors. She mentioned him the way some people mention weather in places they wish they still lived. He crossed the ballroom in a navy suit, polished shoes, silver watch, and the easy confidence of a man who had never had to wonder whether he belonged. Rachel brightened before he even reached her. I saw it from beside the bar. Her shoulders lifted. Her smile sharpened. She touched her hair once, then the small diamond at her throat, the necklace I had given her on our 12th anniversary after she said she wanted something simple. Simple had cost me $8,000. Tyler took both of her hands like an old friend returning from a better version of life. "Rachel Collins," he said, using her maiden name with a grin. "You really did build yourself a beautiful world." She laughed, and for a second I heard the younger woman from our first apartment, the one who used to sit on the floor with takeout and believe in me. Then she answered, "I had to. Some people are born to lead. Some people just support." Tyler's eyes moved to me. Not all the way. Just enough. A polite glance. A quick inventory. Dark suit. Plain tie. Wedding ring. No visible importance. He gave me the kind of nod men give to hotel staff when they are not sure whether tipping is expected. Daniel, right? He asked. Rachel has told me you keep things running behind the scenes. Behind the scenes. I almost smiled. There are phrases that sound harmless until you hear the room agree with them. Brandon drifted over, smelling like bourbon and peppermint, and clapped Tyler on the shoulder. Careful, he said. Daniel is our secret weapon. Quiet as checkbook in Pennsylvania. The men around them laughed. Rachel rolled her eyes, but not at Brandon. At me, as if my presence was the awkward part. I did not speak. I watched. Tyler lifted his glass toward the stage where Margaret was still soaking in applause. Well, whoever funded this, he said, Rachel deserves a room like this. Brandon leaned in, happy to sharpen the blade. Oh, Daniel gave her the room. Just not the man. The line landed. People laughed harder than it deserved. That is how humiliation works in polite rooms. No one throws anything. No one shouts. They just smile while your place at the table gets smaller and smaller. Rachel said, Brandon, in that soft warning tone people use when they want credit for stopping something without actually stopping it. Tyler chuckled and looked down into his drink. I looked at my wife. She did not look ashamed. She looked inconvenienced, as if my dignity had chosen the wrong night to ask for space. Then the master of ceremonies tapped the microphone, and the room turned toward the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, before dinner is served, the Collins family would like to recognize the spirit of generosity that made tonight possible. Margaret waved Rachel forward. Rachel took my hand without looking at me. Her fingers were cold, not nervous, controlling. We walked toward the stage under the soft gold light, past tables of people who had eaten from my money and laughed at my silence. On the podium sat the cream-colored card, thick as a wedding invitation, waiting for my name. Behind us, the screen glowed with the words Collins Family Christmas Legacy Dinner, sponsored by Collins Holdings. Collins Holdings, a company that did not own a truck, a desk, a bank account, or a single honest dollar. Rachel leaned close, her smile frozen for the cameras. Please, she whispered, do not ruin this. I picked up the gold pen. The room held its breath in, the cheerful way people do before dessert. I signed slowly, Daniel Whitaker. Then I placed the pen down, stepped toward the microphone, and felt my phone vibrate once against my chest. Ready. One word. That was all I needed. The microphone felt colder than it should have. I rested my hand on the side of the podium and looked out at the ballroom. Faces turned toward me, bright and expectant, waiting for something harmless. A thank you. A small joke. A husband's polite surrender wrapped in holiday language. Rachel stood beside me with her smile locked in place, the kind of smile that warned me without moving her lips. Margaret held her champagne flute near her chest, already preparing to nod like a queen accepting tribute. Brandon leaned against the edge of the stage, amused. Tyler watched from the front table with one hand in his pocket, his expression smooth and interested, as if I had been invited to entertain him for 30 seconds before the important people resumed their evening. I cleared my throat. The sound moved through the speakers, low and steady. Before dinner continues, I said, I need to correct one line on the screen. Rachel's hand found my wrist. Her fingers tightened just enough to be a message. Not affection, not fear yet. Control. Daniel, she whispered, barely moving her mouth. I did not look at her. The ballroom quieted in pieces. First the front tables, then the cousins near the dessert display, then the older men by the bar who had been laughing at something they would not remember tomorrow. The master of ceremonies froze beside the curtain with his cue cards in both hands. For 1 second, nothing happened. The screen behind me still showed that elegant lie, sponsored by Collins Holdings. Then it went black. A small ripple moved through the room. Someone coughed. A fork touched a plate. Rachel's nails pressed into my sleeve. The screen lit again. This time there were no snowflakes. No gold script. No family crest Margaret had paid a designer to invent. Just a clean white background and a single line in dark blue letters. Paid in full by Whitaker Freight Solutions. Beneath it sat the date of the wire transfer, the confirmation number, and the name of the person who submitted the payment request, Rachel Whitaker. The silence that followed was not empty. It was crowded. Crowded with calculations, embarrassment, memory, and every laugh from the past hour trying to crawl backward into people's mouths. Margaret lowered her glass an inch. Brandon straightened. Tyler's expression changed first in the eyes. Rachel stopped breathing for half a second. I felt it through her hand on my wrist. I leaned closer to the microphone, not because I needed volume, but because calm carries better when no one wants to hear it. The hotel has been fully paid, I said. The band has been paid. The valet service has been paid. The floral arrangements, the video crew, the custom ornaments, the charity donation, and the private dining package have all been paid. I paused. The room did not move. By my company. Somewhere near the back, Claire, the event manager, stood beside the service door with her tablet held against her chest. She looked pale, but not surprised. She had seen the paperwork. Paperwork does not blush. People do. Margaret's lips parted, but nothing came out. Brandon gave a short laugh that died before it became a sound. Rachel finally pulled her hand away from my wrist like my skin had become too honest to touch. I turned slightly, just enough to look at her. Her face was still beautiful under the warm stage lights. But beauty is a fragile thing when truth enters the room. It does not disappear. It just stops being useful. You told me not to mention my company name, I said quietly. So I waited until the screen could do it for me. The words landed softer than an accusation and harder than a shout. The first slide stayed behind me, bright and clean. One line, one name, one receipt large enough for 100 people to read. I could have stopped there. For one breath, I almost did. Then I looked at Brandon, at Margaret, at Tyler, and finally at Rachel, the woman who had spent years teaching people to see me as the background of her life. My phone vibrated again in my pocket. The next file was ready. And the truth, once invited, rarely comes alone. The second slide appeared without music, without decoration, without mercy. At the top was a simple heading, additional payments requested through Rachel Whitaker. Under it, line by line, the year unfolded like a ledger with teeth. Aspen Lodge deposit, $8,400. Brandon Collins consulting emergency, $12,000. Margaret Collins kitchen renovation balance, $19,600. Private school tuition assistance for Owen Collins, $6,000. Credit card payoff labeled family medical concern, $14,300. Each item had a date. Each date had a message. Each message had Rachel's name attached to it. No one laughed now. The room had become so quiet I could hear the soft hum of the projector above us and the distant clink of dishes behind the service doors. It is strange how quickly a ballroom can turn into a courtroom when the evidence is large enough. Rachel stared at the screen like she could stop it by refusing to blink. Margaret's face hardened first, then loosened, then went pale beneath her makeup. Brandon took one step back from the stage, as if distance could separate him from his own invoices. I did not explain every line. I did not need to. The beautiful thing about dates, dollar amounts, and written requests is that they do not care who is embarrassed. They simply stand there. The next slide showed screenshots of Rachel's messages. Daniel, can you cover this quietly? Daniel, Mom is stressed. Please do not make her ask. Daniel, Brandon will pay you back after his deal closes. Daniel, just use the company account for now. Daniel, please do not mention your business at dinner. I watched people read them. I watched their faces change. That was the moment the lie stopped being a misunderstanding and became a pattern. Tyler Grant looked at Rachel, then at me, then down at his drink. He had come into that room believing he was close to the winning side. Now he was studying the floor like there might be an exit hidden under the carpet. Margaret finally found her voice, thin and sharp around the edges. This is inappropriate, she said. I turned toward her. So was thanking yourself for money you did not spend. A sound moved through the guests. Not laughter, not applause, something lower. Recognition, maybe. The unpleasant kind. Brandon lifted both hands and tried to smile. Come on, Daniel, this is family stuff. Nobody needs a spreadsheet at Christmas. I looked at him for the first time that evening. Really looked. You needed one when you asked my wife for $12,000 and called it temporary. His mouth closed. The slide changed again. This one showed the fake sponsor line Rachel had submitted to the hotel, Collins Holdings. Beneath it was a state business registry search showing no active company by that name connected to her family. Then came the email where Rachel instructed the hotel to use that name on all signage. Claire, the event manager, lowered her eyes. She knew this part. She had asked for clarification twice. Rachel had answered both times. I stepped back from the microphone and let the room sit with it. That is another thing I had learned in business. Never talk over the strongest document. Let it breathe. Let people lean forward. Let the truth do the work your anger would only weaken. Rachel's voice came out barely above a whisper. Daniel, stop. It was the first honest thing she had said all night. Not because she regretted what she had done, because it was working. I looked at the guests, the Collins relatives, the country club friends, the men who had laughed with Brandon, the women who had smiled politely while Margaret accepted praise. For years, I said, I was told I did not understand appearances. Tonight, I finally do. Appearances are expensive, and apparently, I have been paying for all of them. The final slide appeared behind me. It was not a receipt. It was a letter from my attorney, Samuel Pierce, confirming termination of all unauthorized family reimbursement channels, removal of Rachel's access to Whitaker Freight Solutions accounts, and formal notice of financial separation. The room seemed to shrink around those words. Rachel covered her mouth with one hand. Margaret sat down as if her knees had remembered gravity. Brandon looked at the floor. Tyler did not look at anyone. I folded the cream-colored card once, the one they had, asked me to sign, and placed it on the podium. My name was still there under theirs. Black ink. Clean line. Final. I leaned toward the microphone one last time and said, I did not come here to ruin Christmas. I came here to stop financing a story where I was the only one not allowed to know the plot. Rachel reached for my arm before I made it off the stage. Not hard. Not dramatic. Just quick enough to remind me she still thought I could be guided if she touched the right place. Daniel, she whispered, and this time her voice did not have polish in it. It had panic. The ballroom behind us stayed frozen in that strange half-life after public truth, where people pretend to look at their plates while listening with their whole bodies. I stepped down from the stage, and Rachel followed so closely I could hear the soft catch in her breathing. She did not pull me toward the tables. She pulled me toward the side hallway, past the coat check, past a tower of wrapped decorative boxes, past a window where snow drifted under the yellow light of the valet stand. The music had started again in the ballroom, but lower now, thinner, as if even the piano player was afraid to press the keys too hard. Rachel stopped beside the glass doors leading to the terrace. Outside, the night was white and still. Inside, her face was bright with humiliation. How could you do that to me? She said. I looked at her for a long second. 14 years of marriage stood between us, but suddenly it felt like a hallway with every light turned on. I saw the first apartment, the paper cartons of takeout, the woman who once believed I could build something. Then I saw the country club lunches, the careful introductions, the way her hand slipped from mine whenever someone wealthier entered the room. I did not do that to you, I said. I showed them what you did with my name. She shook her head fast, like speed could erase facts. It was one night. It was one party. My mother was under pressure. Brandon was struggling. You do not understand what it is like in my family. That almost made me laugh. Not because it was funny, because I understood too well. I understood the invoices. I understood the whispered instructions. I understood being placed at the edge of every photograph and the center of every payment request. No, I said, I understand exactly what it is like in your family. Everything is love until someone asks for a receipt. Her eyes filled, but the tears arrived late. Too late to be grief. Early enough to be strategy. You embarrassed me in front of Tyler, she said, and there it was. Not my pain. Not our marriage. Tyler. A name stepping out of her mouth like the real guest of honor. I felt something inside me go quiet for the last time. That is what you were worried about? I asked. She looked away. Snow moved behind her reflection in the glass. For a moment, her face and the winter blurred together. I just wanted them to be proud of me, she said. Her voice cracked on proud. I wanted to feel sorry for her. A part of me did. But pity is not the same as permission. You could have let them be proud of the truth, I said. You chose a lie because the truth included me. She wiped under one eye with her finger, careful not to ruin her makeup. Even falling apart, Rachel knew where the cameras might be. We can fix this, she said. We can go back inside. I will say there was a misunderstanding. You can tell them it was some tax thing, some business arrangement. Daniel, please, do not end our marriage over money. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket and took out the envelope Samuel Pierce had prepared. Plain white. No drama. No gold lettering. Her name typed cleanly across the front. Rachel stared at it like it had made a sound. It was never the money, I said. It was every time you let them laugh and then asked me to pay for the room. Her hand rose to her mouth. I held out the envelope. She did not take it at first, so I placed it gently on the narrow table beside the terrace doors. The diamond on her necklace caught the light when she looked down. My gift. Her armor. What is this? She whispered. Financial separation. Account closures. A legal notice from my attorney. And a place for you to send anything that needs to be said in writing. Her face changed then. Not because she had lost me. I think part of her had known that already. It changed because she realized I had stopped negotiating. She reached for my hand, but I stepped back. Just one step. A small one. Enough to become a boundary. The ballroom doors opened behind us, and Brandon's voice floated into the hall, smaller than it had sounded all night. Rachel. She turned toward him, then back to me, caught between the audience she had built and the husband she had spent years erasing. I picked up my coat from the chair near the hallway and put it over my arm. You did not want a husband, I said. You wanted a signature. Then I walked toward the lobby, leaving her beside the glass, with the snow falling behind her and the envelope waiting at her side. I left the Harrington Grand through the front doors while the pianist inside kept playing a careful version of Silent Night. The cold hit my face first, clean and honest, and for the first time all evening, nobody was asking me to smile. Snow had covered the sidewalk in a thin white sheet, not deep enough to slow traffic, just enough to soften the city lights and quiet the sound of my shoes. The valet looked up from his stand and straightened, probably expecting me to hand him a ticket. I did not. I told him I would walk. It was only 6 blocks to the parking garage, and I needed every one of them. Behind me, the hotel glowed like a lantern full of people learning how expensive pretending could be. My phone buzzed 3 times before I reached the corner. Rachel. Rachel again. Then Brandon. I did not answer. At the red light, I took my wedding ring off and held it in my palm. 14 years can feel heavy for something so small. By the time the walk signal changed, my hand was empty. The ring was in my coat pocket, no longer a promise, just evidence of one that had expired. The next morning, Samuel Pierce filed everything exactly the way we had prepared it. Access to Whitaker Freight Solutions accounts was revoked. The shared credit line was frozen. Reimbursement demands went out with copies of every invoice attached. The hotel was paid, the vendors were protected, the employees who worked that night received their tips, and not one innocent person carried the cost of the Collins family performance. That mattered to me. Revenge without discipline is just another mess someone else has to clean up. 3 days later, Margaret sent an email with no subject line. It was long, stiff, and wounded, the kind of apology that kept tripping over pride. Brandon called 11 times, then left one message saying men should talk these things through. Tyler Grant disappeared from Rachel's social circle as quickly as he had entered it. Men like that do not stay for the cleanup. Rachel came by the house once, wearing no makeup, holding the envelope I had left in the hallway at the hotel. She stood on the porch while a cold rain tapped against the gutters and said she had made mistakes. I believed her. Mistakes are real. So are patterns. She said she never meant to make me feel invisible. I told her invisibility was not something a wife accidentally gives her husband for years. She cried then, quietly, and for once I did not doubt the tears. But tears do not rewrite ledgers. They do not unteach a room how to laugh at you. They do not turn a signature back into a marriage. By New Year's, I had moved into a smaller house 20 minutes from the warehouse, a brick place with a 2-car garage, a working fireplace, and no room that felt staged for company. On the first Friday of January, I hosted a late holiday dinner for my employees in the old distribution bay. Folding tables, paper plates, slow-cooked brisket, mashed potatoes, green beans, pecan pie, and coffee strong enough to keep a trucker awake from Harrisburg to Pittsburgh. No string quartet, no gold lettering, no invented legacy. Just people who knew what work looked like and said thank you without needing a photographer nearby. Near the end of the night, Claire from the Harrington Grand sent me a final receipt marked closed. I stared at that word for a while. Closed. Not destroyed. Not ruined. Closed. Some chapters deserve that kind of ending. Clean, complete, signed by the truth. I looked around the warehouse at the drivers, dispatchers, mechanics, and office staff laughing under plain fluorescent lights, and I felt something I had not felt in years. Not victory. Peace. That night taught me that a signature can be a chain when you give it to people who see your kindness as access. But in the right moment, with the truth behind it, a signature can also become a blade. Mine did not cut anyone down. It cut me free.